Hello, meteorologist Brian Karstens here with an update on our predictions for the upcoming weekend. So these are some talking points that I thought were important to bring up, and we're going to visit about that. First of all, when we talk about this weekend storm, this is a classic March storm, and I really want to emphasize that phrasing here because these are pretty normal things that we see in the volatility of weather in the early to middle part of March, and these things will come blazing through the plains with wind and snow. And of course, there's always a component of mixed precipitation, it seems, and also rain. So we're just going to kind of walk our way through that. I do see a couple of things here to visit about. And one of those would be the duration of this. This is a compact system. In other words, it's coming out basically in one piece. And a lot of that for Sioux Falls is going to be Saturday morning, but I think it'll probably also continue into the afternoon. But really, you could even narrow it down to even like a 6 or 12-hour window, and then the whole thing going maybe 24 to 36 hours. So that's kind of my view on it. And heaviest snow is still going to be mostly north of Interstate 90. That's not to say there won't be some heavier totals south of the interstate as well, but the complexity of the rain snow line, that's a big deal. Also, blowing and drifting. Yes, that occurs during the heavy snow. But the other thing we've got to evaluate here is the fact that, yeah, this is heavy, wet snow. And now we'll have a tendency to get a little bit drier as time goes on, especially by late Saturday night and early Sunday. But winter storm watches are out for a large area of South Dakota. The exceptions being the far southwest here around Custer, Hot Springs area down here. And then you also have Vermilion and Sioux City and Spencer, Iowa, not in the watch, at least at this point in time. All right, let's take a look at this. I put the storm track up here as we follow the center of the main low pressure center coming in out of Denver, northern Kansas, takes a turn, goes up toward Des Moines, and probably up toward Green Bay. So that's why you have all these winter storm watches in South Dakota, Minnesota, and parts of northern Nebraska. Now let's take this animation and we're going to take you out through Friday night and early Saturday morning. So we basically have a shield of snow. And what's resulting here is this low pressure center is going to be pretty good at developing this conveyor belt of moisture. I'm really interested to see how this pans out because of the timing of the day parts here. This is an early morning event here. Now, typically we talk about thunderstorms in the warm sector and how that impacts, the moisture flow coming up into Kettleland. But I think at this point it's safe to say there'll be a fair amount of moisture that will make it here, and that's even with the accountability for some of those storms to the south. The rain snow line. This is the big deal right there. Sioux Falls area, maybe a little south, and that's something that unfortunately is going to be a complexity, probably getting all the way up to, when we can see into the white of the eyes of this storm here. So unfortunately, that's just not going to help our confidence as much as we would like, but it is a reality. The bottom line, though, we're going to get moisture. We're going to put that on top of the old snow, and that's eventually going to complicate our lives a little bit more as time goes on. One thing, too, I wanted to point out with this wind. Okay, initially there's going to be an easterly wind with this, but then there's going to be a pause zone right in here. Now, this is an example at about midday on Saturday. That's a point where you're going to get the winds pivoting around to the northwest. And in the middle of that, there's probably going to be a break. So don't be fooled by that, because once we get into the winds here Saturday night and in early Sunday morning, they will be cranking up. Thankfully, most of the forcing for the heaviest snow will have departed over here by that point. So I think what we're dealing with going into the overnight Saturday night is basically the leftover snow being raked around by, let's say, a 40, maybe a gust of 45 or 50. That's a lot of wind, but I'm also going to count on a lot of that snow up front being heavy, wet snow. And there's usually a tendency for less of that to blow and drift. There will be some, don't get me wrong, but it'd be a different story if we were going into this with, 20-degree weather or 25 versus, closer to 30, which is, I think, how Sioux Falls is going to end up. Let's go to our snow map. This is our projection right now. Just kind of a first glance. And what I did here is I looked at the basics here of the European model, and we're structuring our forecast based on that. And what we've got here, at least in the upfront forecast, is a Sioux Falls prediction of getting to that 4-inch threshold. I think that seems pretty doable. We could go more if we can convert to snow faster. Sometimes what'll happen in a situation like this too is you'll end up getting really heavy snow rates when that big conveyor belt comes up from the south. And what that can do is it can actually really cool the column of air. And so we could get snow rates that could come in that 2-inch an hour mark. If that starts happening Saturday morning, yeah, we're going to go above 4. But we also are probably going to have a tendency to push air in from Iowa. That is warmer. That's kind of the counterbalance there. And so that's why your amounts in Northwest Iowa could be a little more volatile. The volatility, at least, if you will, is a little bit more so on that side. Aberdeen, I think, is in a pretty good spot to get a lot of snow. Watertown as well. I'm not going to shy away from some 6-inch numbers up here. Pierre as well, I think, has a solid case as long as we get the wraparound. And of course, we got to continue to pump the moisture all the way back to Pierre. That's kind of the biggest question mark right now for you folks. I do think Rapid, though, would be less. I know there's a watch out for Rapid, but you're not quite in the thick of it, at least not in my view at this point. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about here quickly is the wind forecast. As you see there, we go around to the east with this system, and then you can definitely tell here as time goes on. Here's a snapshot of Saturday morning. So that's a lot of wind out of the east. East River counties in the southeast really dealing with that. And then look how rapid and down toward Winter and Valentine. Boy, that wind comes up Saturday afternoon, and that's going to come cranking into Sioux Falls, Huron, Watertown, Marshall. So just a little note there on that too. Let's take a look at something else. Moisture supply. Not just with the first system, but the second one. We don't want to overlook this. There's another storm coming up next week. And look at these totals. Now, this is a ballpark estimate. We don't want to get locked in on exact numbers yet. But what we can tell you is that there's a large area of the upper Midwest that is prone to an inch or two of water, or locally more, depending on how this feature shifts around here in the upper plains. And we've seen this moving around, and I'm still expecting that's going to happen to some extent. But here's the deal. This is why next week is a little bit more interesting. You got a big low pressure. This thing is diving into Mexico, and you've got basically a connection of moisture here from the Gulf of Mexico coming up into this system. And if you look at the jet stream winds, look how they take this turn and then they go to the north and take a really sharp turn. And there's a lot going for this storm to come out in pieces. Okay, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. Notice I worded this as it comes in pieces. Rain is a big player. And yeah, there's probably going to be a blizzard somehow, some way out of that. I don't want to get specific just yet, but I do think that is a real possibility. Okay, so with that said, we've got a lot of resources. KEVOland.com is full of things, including this story that you're watching this video update with. We're going to continue to monitor the latest information. Scott Munn will have you covered tomorrow morning. That's all for now, and have a great night.